Welcome to Health Stealth Radio, where we move away from the mundane to gather insights from the shadows of enterprise and patient cybersecurity. Yes, we surely believe that traditional themes like endpoint software and zero trust are critical, but given massive advances in AI, remote and wearable device hacking, and data hostage negotiators, there's a much darker side to cybersecurity, and not everyone is quite willing to talk about it in public. Health Stealth Radio will thrive on these topics and encourage fireside spats to debate them. Here's your host, Frank Cutitta.
Hi, it's Frank Cutitta. Welcome back to Health Stealth Radio for this week's episode. I have the pleasure of having a colleague of mine, Lisa Gallagher, who I've gotten to know very well. I mean, Lisa and I have started working together on the State of Healthcare Cybersecurity event this year and part of last year, and we're building that out again this year. She has incredible credentials in this field. It shames me in terms of what I've done in my career because I'm sort of a poser in cybersecurity, but Lisa's actually done this stuff. So I'd like to welcome her, and also just like to add that as we evolve the Health Stealth Radio franchise as it is, that Lisa will be taking over one episode a month, which is fantastic because she brings some great contacts, very deep Rolodex, and I think you'll enjoy. She's already had one episode that she's recorded, so it'd be worthwhile to look back on that. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Lisa, and just Lisa, tell us about where you came from and how you got here.
Well, hi, Frank, and thanks for having me. I've been in cyber for about 35 years. I'm an electrical engineer by background. Really started doing cyber from the beginning of my career, working with NIST and NSA, doing what we used to call information security. I've worked as a consultant for many, many years for various companies. I worked for 10 years at HIMSS as their cybersecurity expert. Then I went from there to being a managing director in the cyber practice at PwC. Since retired from there, and now I'm a consultant again, and I'm working for CHIME as their national cybersecurity advisor. So happy to be here today.
That's fantastic. As I said, great credentials that I only wish I had. So one of the things that we wanted to talk about, Lisa and I have a one-on-one once a week, and it's supposedly a half hour. It ends up being an hour and 10 minutes most of the time because we try to solve each of the world's cybersecurity problems in each call. But one of the things that came up, and it's related to a new program that I'll be launching called The Brand Called You, which is for healthcare IT leaders and innovators talking about their own personal branding journey. One of the things that we've talked about is that the role of the CISO or CISO, however you like to pronounce it, is evolving, and that personal brand is becoming more and more important as that role evolves. And we have various generational aspects of this, and we have various professional backgrounds that people are coming in from. So, and Lisa running part of our CHIME, almost said HIMSS, part of our CHIME CISO boot camps has a window into this. So, one of the things I wanted to talk about and have Lisa talk about is this changing role and how she sees, both now and in her mentoring role that she's done for years, how she sees CISOs needing help with how they brand themselves. So just with that as a very broad intro, Lisa, could you just talk a little bit about what you're seeing out there, especially in the changing role, and then how the brand has to change related to that, just like any consumer brand for that matter?
Okay, well, a little bit more on my background. When I was at PwC, I actually had the opportunity to serve as an interim CISO twice for our clients. Once, the first time was a very large healthcare organization. After it had a major breach, they didn't actually have a CISO at the time. And so as part of the work that we did to help them build their program after the breach, they needed an interim CISO. So I did that for about 8 months. The following year, I ended up doing it again, this time for a financial services company. So I've been in the role of a CISO myself, and actually at a time of crisis as well. And so that gave me some experience in the seat of a CISO. But at PwC, we started to look at the role, and we were really concerned that we were talking to executives who were having challenges with the role for various reasons. Um, and the more we did interim CISO work, the more we decided, well, we really don't want to do that. It takes people, out of the market. They have to be in a specific city, and it's challenging for the individual, but also for PwC. We wanted to instead take a look at how could we support the role and help CISOs that were in place to be more successful. That prompted us to do a survey globally of executives of all different types of organizations and all different sectors, and really ask those executives what was working for them with their CISOs, and whenever they had a challenge with the role or the individual, what did that challenge look like? What do the executives expect or need from that role? And then we did publish that in a white paper with Harvard Business Review. But further, we took the data that we gathered from that survey, and we tried to create a set of services to support the CISO role. And those were varied. It really, from staff augmentation in their function to interim CISOs to deputy CISOs to a succession plan, all kinds of services that would serve the organization and the CISO themselves. And then, and I ended up actually having several contracts where I coached in-place CISOs. So that's a long story behind my interest in the role, my past experience providing professional coaching, usually at the behest of their boss or supervisor, the CIO, to sort of support them in the role actively. So that's kind of my background. And now that I'm at CHIME, we do a number of things. We have CISO members, and we have an organization called AHIS, through which we convene CISOs, and we also do a lot of educational materials, thought leadership, etc. So here at CHIME, for the healthcare sector, provider organizations in particular, and we're working very hard to once again take a look at how can we support CISOs that are working in hospitals by providing them a community to interact with each other, providing them education, training, other materials. We do have a CISO boot camp, which we've been running. We just finished a boot camp in the March to April timeframe, and we are having another one, which will be virtual in July. So supporting that boot camp, we're continuing to evolve the curriculum for that, and not only provide information on the technical aspects of being a CISO, but on things like considering how you communicate with the board of directors and the executive suite, thinking about your brand, what do you want to be known for, how do you want to contribute to the organization's goals, etc. So I find myself in a position to be continually looking at that role and how do we support it.
So when you look at the people in your class, I mean, we've talked about this. You have the 101 people that are just new to CISO. Then you have some of the older veterans.
Yeah.
And as with any personal branding exercise, the older people need to somewhat reinvent themselves, unless they're always very dynamic, which all of them aren't. And then you have the younger people, the 101 people that have to invent themselves. So you have this dichotomy of I need to invent myself, and those that need to reinvent themselves. So what if somebody is just congratulations, you're the CISO. You were doing interoperability yesterday, and now in a small organization, you become the
Right.
CISO, as we see in rural hospitals and not so well endowed providers. How do you see the 101 personal brand? What do they need to do to invent themselves, not only for technology and cybersecurity skills, but in terms of personal skills?
Right. I mean, I think one of the challenges that the executives and board of director members that we surveyed expressed is that they have a communications issue. So it's hard for them to understand the security posture of the organization as
Hmm.
communicated to them in the formal interactions that they have, say at an executive meeting or a board meeting, or the reports that are sent.
Hmm.
And so one of the things we work on is how can you communicate better? How do you understand the needs and the actual responsibilities of an executive or a board
Hmm.
member, and then communicate the information to them in terms of what they actually need to do their jobs and also in a language they can understand. So you want to brand yourself as a good communicator. Um, there's a lot of ways to do that, and there are steps that we recommend
Hmm.
to think about how to communicate and then also establish yourself with the reputation as a good communicator. That's one example. I think, there's also leadership. There's also, the ability to function or be perceived as a leader and a
Hmm.
decision maker and an innovator in the organization. Um, a lot of times CISOs start out with their job and necessarily so, they might start out focused on managing their team. They have probably directors and managers in their organization who
Right.
they're looking to mentor. They're also managing the operations of the team. And so they tend to manage their team and keep their head down focused on that. What we try to do is say, hey, well, also, you need to think about establishing relationships with all of the executives across the organization, letting them to get to know you, letting them think about you as a leader and a resource and someone that's working with them towards common goals. Um,
Right.
whether it's running the business and meeting the business's goals, overall business resilience, which crosses over into cyber, how
Hmm.
do you support them in those larger goals?
That's great.
So yeah, so we work about on thinking about, yes, you need to manage your team and the functions that you're responsible for, but you also have to actively manage your relationships, your brand, and your reputation across the organization and be
So,
as a resource.
it just, in the social media sense, they have to be an internal influencer in a large way and know how to communicate using the tools that we have in 2025 and going forward to be able to do that, I would guess.
Exactly. I mean, I think a lot of times, especially for the newer CISOs, they're not really thinking about that. And
Mhm.
so in the boot camp, we actually had a module in one of the classes talking about, think about your brand, think about what you want to be known for,
Hmm.
and establish that as a goal for yourself over time. And then think about the mechanisms that you can leverage to accomplish that, and also measure and manage your brand as well.
This is sort of a blinding glimpse of the obvious, but people that are listening to this program that are hiring a CISO, I would imagine that compared to even 5 years ago, that there has to be a lot more emotional intelligence and endurance than you might have had during the old days, considering the barrage of ransomware attacks and the risks that are involved. What do you think about that? How do you find people? Just looking at it, the fact if you don't do that, we both know that the burnout rates of CISOs is going through the roof because it's a 24/7 job.
Yes, it's a 24/7 job. It's very stressful. It used to be breaches or incidents were rare. We were talking about them in theory. Now, you have things going on every single day, and quite often something that's very urgent, and sometimes overlapping issues or events.
Hmm.
Um, And so it is very challenging from that point of view. And I remember when I started the first interim CISO role, I walked in the door, there had been a very large breach, and already regulatory enforcement and lawsuits were in play. And I just realized initially that I have to be the person who handles a crisis well. I have to be the one who says, we will figure this out, or we've got this. You can't be in a panic. You can't be overwhelmed. And it's hard because this is a very challenging role and there's lots of things going on, and almost everyone in the organization will be looking to you when something happens. So that's a skill that you don't know if you have it until it happens, right? You have to think about it ahead of time and try to plan how you're going to react.
Right.
But you're going to react, and then you have to learn from that, thinking about how to be the person who pulls everyone together, pulls a team together, and just attacks the issue head on.
At the risk of profiling, do you feel that female CISOs and male CISOs vary in terms of the way they approach things?
I mean, I think I haven't really looked at that pattern. I feel like it's a matter of an individual's approach to things, an individual's past experience, and the confidence they have in their problem solving skills. Because really, everything that happens in terms of an incident is a problem to be solved. There's a lot of planning that can go into that ahead of time. And then the better you've planned, the more you've practiced, the better relationships you have with others during a crisis can help you. So to the extent you can be a planner and someone who practices with entire teams,
Right.
it can give you confidence in terms of how you handle incidents going forward. I haven't really thought of it in terms of male and female, but I do encourage everyone to think about these things ahead of time and make a plan on virtually everything: your relationships, your communication, your planning for incidents. So you can see how that takes a lot of time and energy
Right.
away from managing the team or managing the function, right? So it's hard sometimes for a CISO to figure out how to split their time, or how to, how much time to devote to things.
Right.
When I've been actively coaching CISOs, I've actually asked them to measure how much time they spend doing certain things. And usually when I start out coaching someone, I find that they spend almost all 90 to 100% of their time managing their team and managing their function, and not really thinking about communication with executives, and thinking about relationship building with executives and board members, and thinking about incident planning and those kinds of things. So we try to shift the amount of time that they spend into planning and preparing for those relationships and any crisis that might happen.
Well, that upward management has become critical because, I mean, the board members now are saying, what the heck's going on here? And what's the risk analysis in terms of if we get hacked and we have to pay ransom?
Well, they realize their own responsibility. That's, I think, one of the biggest shifts in the last few years, is that each of those board members understands their fiduciary and other responsibilities, and they know that they don't know a lot about cyber, so it makes them nervous. So they do have high expectations as to what's going to be communicated to them, and the type of relationship they would have with the CISO.
Do you think the board members are interested in learning more about cyber? I mean, is that
Yes.
a course,
Yes.
certification program or something?
No, that's a great question, Frank. And I found that when I was in those roles, a couple of times I had board members pull me aside and say, can you spend some time with me between board meetings, teaching me about cybersecurity, the basics, so that I can understand what you're talking about conceptually and the language in which you will express it. And so I've done that before. And actually with CISOs that I advise, or in the boot camp as well, I've offered that as a suggestion. If you find that board members need some education on cyber, offer it to them as a unit or individually. There's nothing wrong with you spending time and saying, this is what we're talking about. This is what we're measuring. As we speak to you quarter over quarter, these are the kinds of metrics you'll get, and this is what it means, helping them along the process. So I highly encourage that. And that's part of relationship building and trust and credibility as well.
Sure is. And on the program that we did back in January, we had a data hostage negotiator, which drew a lot of attention from people that were at the board level. Like, this is a guy that actually goes in and negotiates stuff that we, trying to mitigate our losses. That gets people attention. Some argue, Lisa, that people with a military background as part of their brand are better in this role sometimes. And I sort of found that I thought it was because it's security, it's military, it's a fortress. But I heard a lot of the times that it wasn't really that at all, that it was really because they knew a chain of command structure. Yeah. How do you feel about that?
I think that makes sense to me intuitively. I think there's the way the military operates has a lot of organization and structure and process around it. Mm-hmm. And I think really that's what you need, especially in the incident response realm. So everyone needs to know what's expected of them, who is the incident leader, and how the incident is going to be operated. So I would say that skill set and that approach to running either projects or incident responses makes a lot of sense to me.
Mm-hmm. We have about 4 minutes left, and we always go long, but I'm going to try to keep this tight for my engineer sanity, and him too. What are CISOs bickering about? I mean, are there varying opinions about certain things that CISOs don't all agree on? I'm a big fan of fireside spats. So if I had a fireside spat between two CISOs, what would they be arguing about, if anything? I mean, are they generally in agreement? I mean, I know you did some work related to continuity and resiliency that I'm responsible for resiliency, but continuity is somebody else's job.
Yeah. Okay. So in terms of resiliency, that's been sort of a newer concept and almost a buzzword in the industry the last few years. And, the conversations about what does that mean have entailed, where does the CISO's responsibility lie, and how far does it go in terms of not just incident response, but recovery.
Recovery, right.
Especially in let's say a large provider organization, maybe it's a multi-hospital system or hospital with academic medical centers or whatever. How do you determine how the organization recovers from a cyber incident? Who's in charge of determining which systems are brought up in which order, which are the critical business processes,
right?
Whether it's patient care or financial, and how far does a CISO responsibility go? I think because it's a cyber incident, I think people think that the CISO will be in charge from beginning to end, and others think this should be a transition from the time when the incident is under control,
right,
and the decisions are being made as to when to restore and recover systems, in what order, with what resources. I have heard discussions about that. So some CISOs were like, I'm in charge from beginning to end. And others are saying, I don't want the business continuity and disaster recovery role entirely. I think at some point it gets turned over to, executives or IT executives who make those kind of decisions. I think you could probably get two CISOs in a room to have quite an honest discussion about that topic. And, I think it's different for every organization. So it's something that should be discussed and agreed upon.
That's great. Well, we're right near the end of our time here, and this is not an end to your relationship with Lisa on this program, as she'll be doing once a month, and that I'll be continuing with the other three. Between the two of us, hopefully we'll have something that's somewhat provocative and shocking that you'll be hearing about. And I know the program that Lisa just did was just that. So I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today. hopefully you'll continue following Health Stealth Radio, and keep an eye on Digital Health Insights at CHIME for the upcoming brand called You. Lisa will be part of that, and she'll be incorporating a lot of that in some of the new CISO boot camps that we're doing at CHIME, which have just gotten rave reviews. So I want to thank you again, Lisa. It's been great, and look forward to continuing this.
Thanks for having me, Frank. Thanks for having me, and I'll see you all next time.
Thank you for joining us today in the shadows for this episode of Health Stealth Radio with Frank Cutitta. If you like the program, please be sure to share your comments on our social media sites, or feel free to contact us with suggestions for new and stealthy show themes. We look forward to welcoming you again for our next broadcast. In the meantime, stay safe out there.